Your house is worth whatever it's worth, right? Whoever sells it. Wrong. I'm Charlie. Welcome to Moving Home with Charlie, and thank you for coming.
Charlie Landing grew up in Sussex, is the founder of Best Agent and presenter of Moving Home with Charlie.
If you want to find one of these guys, look out for those compassionate professionals. All estate agents are not the same.
So, Charlie, what would be your advice for people interested in buying new builds right now?
Don't overpay. Do buy, but don't overpay. That's why I say disregard the guff. Read into the numbers and look, and it's buried. The bad news is buried in the small print, okay?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Property Press Awards.
They may or may not be telling the truth, but you should form your own view. Get out and view, get out and view, get out and view. You cannot be in a position to make offers and have the offers accepted if you're not viewing. Just be out there viewing. Pay attention to the back of the class. If you've not been watching my videos, I did one just a couple of days ago. Disregard the guff, guys. Not sure which one I should slurp first.
Yeah, but both together, what a lovely combo. It's the tannins, just tannins.
Evening, Alex.
Hello, mate. How's you doing?
Oh, I'm feeling. Not really sure how to describe how I'm feeling today, but I'm quite cross, actually.
Is that directed mostly at the ONS or just partially?
That's a really good question, because I'm cross with everyone who is complicit in the misdirection, whatever you want to call it, that leads to so many people avoidably skewering themselves and being unnecessarily fucked over. And it makes me cross. Always have done my whole life. I don't know why, since I was a kid. Whenever I see people being unfairly fucked over, makes me cross. Makes me really cross. And, I don't know. We don't know whether the ONS is intentionally pumping out into incorrect or misleading data, whether it's just one of those things because of conflicting advice or because of a flawed process. I don't care. I'm not speculating about that. But the point is, it's demonstrably wrong.
Yep.
No one says a fucking word. And on the back of it, you have people going, oh, but the ONS, and I'm not criticizing the people, right? The people who have no reason not to trust it and go, oh, the ONS said this, okay?
Yeah. Well, my father's a classic case. He will often quote the ONS because he likes looking at the stats. And it's like, yeah, that's not strictly true. You need to look back. And then he goes back and has a look at the revisions they've made and goes, what the fuck? Yes.
I mean, today was such a smoking gun. It was just so immediate. I was like, that's not right. I know that it was 200. From memory, I don't know why. I can remember that it was 291,000 last September when they announced it, and now it's 292,000 13 months later, and they're saying 3.4% up.
Yeah,
something's not right. Anyway, and then yes, provisional estimate, fine, but okay. So the problem is that the relevance of this. Good evening, everybody. Sorry, I'm just speaking.
just went straight into that one.
Just good evening, everybody, and welcome to another cheerful, happy, optimistic, and upbeat episode of How Fucked Are We?
Oh God! At some point, I am going to spit tea all over this bloody laptop. It's just not good. I should switch to wine. That's probably best.
Before you get stuck in, I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you. Right. So I have published. So for everyone who doesn't know what we're going on this evening, back in 2022, Alex put a Facebook post up about how fucked many middle class people were going to be. He saw. I mean, you and I kind of saw similar things from different angles at around about the same time, right?
Yeah.
And it brought us together, which is a beautiful thing. And you then read it out. You read that to me in my flat in London. And I would put it on camera just to get the audio.
Yeah, you sneakily recorded me, you bugger.
No. You agreed to it. And we put it out, and it says, welcome to 2025. And that one went viral on TikTok, had hundreds of thousands of views on TikTok. Only about 10, 15,000 on YouTube. But people are like, oh my God, because what? And for those of you who haven't watched it, there is a link below to it. And I suggest it's only 4 minutes long. You could pause this live stream, go and listen to Welcome to 2025 from the link below for 4 minutes, and then come back, and this will make a lot more sense. And on the back of that conversation, we then talked about, you used this phrase as a throwaway line a couple of times, and I didn't pick up on it the first time. You went, well, where does this all end? Death in poverty. And I thought it was just a throwaway line, and little did I know that actually, no, this was a carefully considered choice of words. Trouble. Death in poverty for everyone except the super rich.
Well, I didn't quite say that. I'd say for most people.
Okay.
But yes, you're right. I mean, it essentially boils down, depending on how you define super rich. Well, I'm not talking about just 100 billionaires hiding out and doing fine. There will be plenty of people who have funds or assets in the millions that will be absolutely fine. But there will be a large proportion of this population who are struggling anyway now, and with fewer births and the changing demographic and taxation and all of the rest of these things, the collapse of the NHS potentially, death in poverty is becoming a real possibility, especially when you take into account that I think everyone would accept that we are going through a technology revolution and have been going through one for the last 40 odd years, which has changed the face of society and our interactions. You just have to look at social media and phones and so on and so forth. It's changing society. And every time that happens, whether it was the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, both times in the UK and then globally, there were winners and losers. And each time the number of losers concentrated in some instances, or at least in the last revolution, in the cities, where they thought they could find jobs and ended up living in ghetto poverty. It took a long time for the benefits to be realized because people jumped on the bandwagon way too early, just as we did with the dot-com boom. I mean, yet look at the internet. All those dot-com companies, they weren't wrong. They were just early. And some of them had terrible concepts. But opening now is almost as difficult as it was then, because now you have such a monopoly or monopolies from companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Meta, or Alphabet and Meta, however you want to term them, and then into the hardware side from people like NVIDIA and Tesla to some degree, or at least X, however you want to term it, Musk. And that's the point. All of these companies are easily identifiable by individuals. And this revolution is going to have a nasty fallout, which we are experiencing and have been for some time.
So and again, I'm going to discuss this as though people watching don't know what we're talking about. Back in 2022, you saw the early signs of what some people have described as a wealth transfer, what some people have talked about as a government grab, and there've been a range of different theories on offer about what's actually happening. But even if you sort of look at all of the various theories collectively, they do all seem to say the same sort of thing, which is everyone's money is going to be taken away from them.
Yeah, but it's the bit that I have an issue with is that there are people suggesting that this is a coherent long-term strategy and plan.
Can we come to that later? I know
Yeah.
I do want to discuss that, but my point was, I'd love to ask you this question first. What was it that made you write that Facebook post about the couple that you saw who had a great life, and by 2025 their life's not so great? What was it that actually spurred you on to?
It was literally a couple next door who bought exactly that flat.
Okay.
And they had bought it in 2019. They did it up. And by doing it up, I mean they did put some damp proofing in and they repainted. They did no major remodeling. And they thought that in beginning of 22, that they should be rewarded with an additional £250,000 on the price of the property, and were then amazed when they couldn't get it. And it was the outrage on their faces. And I sat there going, "You've got to be nuts! You've owned this place 2 years. It's a 2-bed flat in Putney, literally next door, and you think by painting it you've added £250,000 of value. How does that work?"
Yeah. Okay. And then now, so basically, from that story, you then said, "This is what's going to happen by 2025," and then death in poverty is a sort of extension of that, right?
Yeah, that's different. That was looking at during the whole COVID period. I was looking at COVID numbers, but that led you to other numbers. And it was at that point that I realized, quite how much debt we were creating. The fact that, people don't have defined benefit pensions anymore. They have contribution pensions, and their contributions are pretty bloody meager, both from themselves and from their employers. That we have an aging boomer population who are going to require very expensive healthcare because the cost of that has gone through the roof. And so a lot of people that I know, our age group, late 40s, early 50s, I know a number of people who have no pension. They have nothing, no savings. They're basically living hand to mouth. I mean, they're earning decent money, but they're really living hand to mouth on the understanding that, oh, that's okay, because I'm going to inherit. Yeah. There's a lot of slips twixt cup and lip with inheritance, whether that's taxation or whether it's care costs, whatever it may be. Don't depend on that.
So I had a one-to-one video call with someone who booked a video call this evening who is selling a house. This is a successful young person, self-employed, in their 20s, selling their 3-bed house for just over $500,000 and buying an apartment in London for 1.2 million. And they booked a call with me. This is a single person. Because he said he wasn't sure it was actually the best idea.
Well, okay, but he had that thought.
Yes, because of this channel.
Yeah.
And he said that. He said, first of all, he got 200 or so grand off the asking price because of this channel, because otherwise he would have just thought, oh, well, you pay asking price. Because he said he didn't know. But even then I said, so were there any other offers? No. And we went through it. And the point was, I'll be very surprised if he proceeds with that purchase now.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't out of necessity. It was out of it was like,
I want to live in London. This is what I can do. But it's madness. I mean, when you dig into, especially London, I mean, this is peculiar to London. Flat prices have been flat or falling since 2016. People seem to think, oh, well, it's always going up. No, just go and look at the price paid data and look at houses that have sold multiple times. Flats that have sold multiple times. You will find that on average prices, and this is in nominal terms, so in real terms, given our recent inflation bout, they are up to 30% lower than they were in 2016. It's horrendous.
So I worked out today that according to going on the ONS's own figures, after inflation, the average house value is down £12,000 in the last year.
Yeah. Yes.
Everyone just let that sink in, right? Even though accepting the ONS's report of nominal prices up 3.4%, they are still down 12%. £12,000, about 4%, in value terms once adjusted for inflation. And this is something that no one takes into account. Which, by the way, so guys, I keep on trying to say what this video is about. This video is about how bad is 2025 now looking, now that we are mere days away from it, compared to when Alex wrote this Welcome to 2025 story back in 2022. Well, no, 2021 you wrote it, actually. We recorded it in 2022.
Oh, yes. No, you're right. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Oh, dear. How old are we? Well, and this is the thing. There've been a number of changes, haven't there? So one of the things that people will pick up on is the fact that these guys moved on to a variable rate mortgage that I think I'd said in the video was at 6.5%. Now, they're not going to be that bad now. Not because the base rate I was actually spot on, that it would have fallen to 5%, I think. Yeah. But what I hadn't anticipated is that mortgage companies have cut their profits, because ordinarily they would have been pricing a variable rate at around 2% above the base rate. but actually they've slashed that so they can still get the business, just as their 2 and 5 year fixes now have fallen. However, it still holds true that compared with the people who got a mortgage in 21 at 1.5%, they are going to be paying substantially more. The other big difference is that at that point when I wrote it, wages had just started falling. And the prediction was that zombie companies were going to fail because banks would foreclose. And then the government came in and said, no, we want forbearance. We're going to let people get away with not paying their debts. That'll be fine. And these companies continued, and we did always say hanging on by their fingernails. They've continued up until this point, and maybe the final nail was put in the coffin in the October budget. But wages, they did have a brief dip. And then we had the highest wage growth that we've had basically since the 70s. Now, that was quite unexpected because where that money was coming from was anybody's guess. These companies, shouldn't have been able to pay it. Now, part of that, and Patricia's here. Hello, Patricia. And she will vehemently point out that when you start a recession, or at least when you start laying people off, and you have a reduced workforce, like the many millions of people in the UK who didn't rejoin the workforce after COVID, what happens is the remaining people are earning more money. And so it appears that wages are going up across the board. But in reality, that can be quite a tricky thing to really work out. So again, it's that problem of looking at averages across regions or countries. And it doesn't tell the story of the huge divide between people in this country in the finance sector who are earning 150,000 a year, sort of minimum, versus the people in the north of England who are working, doing manual labor, who are making minimum wage.
Did you see that Bloomberg article today saying that official figures now reveal that 200,000 jobs have gone this year? 200,000 jobs have gone by employers in the UK this year. Do you see that?
I didn't, but I've got to be, it's a bit like the inflation data today. These are not big numbers. It sounds 200,000. Oh my God. We've only got 30 million people working in this country. 200,000 is an appreciable amount. But there's a lot of ebb and flow in terms of these jobs. As some go here, others are gained elsewhere. There's nothing at the moment where you'd go, oh, this is it. It's the end. But it's not a good sign.
Okay. All right. So you think that's not really worthy of comment? As in, it's not that big a deal.
It's not. No, it's worth noting. But I don't think that is a massive issue. It can be the start of a big issue.
Okay. Yeah. So 200,000 people fewer employed.
Yeah. It will have an impact to the local businesses. I mean, no doubt about it. But as we've seen over the last 2 years, it's a slow old grind. Let's put it this way. I don't think you would say, I certainly wouldn't, or any of your audience would say that actually the country feels like a better, more prosperous place now than it did in 2018, for instance.
Well, this is one of the points I really wanted to actually discuss with you, because in 2022, we were still riding the wave of COVID cash. Yep. Everyone felt pretty flush, one way or the other. Everyone had money. There were new businesses opening up, there were new restaurants opening up, and they were always full. There were people with money, and people going on holiday. And I remember down it was just buzzing. It really was kind of buzzing. 21, especially 22. That's when I first called the top. And you and I started saying it's going to get bleak. It's going to get hard. People are going to have their money taken up. And now, coming towards the end of 2024, I don't know anybody who isn't feeling that there's been a pinch one way or another. To some extent or another, things got tighter. Yep. And I know a lot of people where things got really tight, like horribly tight, like we don't know how we're going to survive time. We don't know what to do, so we're just going to carry on and hope. A lot of people in that situation as well. It's much bleaker. A lot of people talking about how their friends, they like IT contractors saying there's been so much work forever, and now suddenly there are people who had no work for a year.
Yep. Well, and even the people who are doing well, who in their 40s have just received promotions, big pay rises, they're also the people, if they've had children, who have children at private school. And I know a number of couples where they went, oh, yeah, well, no, I had a really good year. I've got this promotion. It's all good. But, of course, it's all been taken by the increase in VAT on private school fees.
Yep.
And so much as they think in their heads, and this is the thing, if you get given a promotion and more money and you don't factor in inflation, you go, oh, I've got more money, except you've probably just broken even. Then you throw in the extra cost and you're still in your head, no, but I'm better off because I'm earning so much more money. It's like, you're not. That's not the way it works.
And this is the point I wanted to come on to, which is that so many people, there's a real disconnect between what they think is happening and what's actually happening. And it is that disconnect and that lack of understanding of what's really happening that is hastening the financial demise of many people, and their future and their pension and their inheritance. All of those things are being eviscerated. For example, you go and ask 100 first-time buyers whether or not prices are going up or down, and 95% of them will say, oh, they're going up. Is your house worth more now than when you bought it a year ago? Oh, it's definitely worth more. 95%, even though, actually, even with the ONS's overblown figures, factoring inflation, it's worth less.
Yep.
Worth less money. If you paid $291,000 for it just over a year ago, if it isn't worth £305,000 now, it hasn't kept up with inflation, you're actually worse off. And, of course, the other massive bit of news today, I think, is significant. Hang on a second, let's get it on screen. Do you know what's coming?
Don't say inflation. No, he said inflation. It was always going up.
I know. There's no surprise here, but it don't you find it remarkable how much this OOH just doesn't get talked about by the
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. No. Okay. So you're going to break it down into the owner occupier cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is a massive. I mean, look at it going back to 2014. It's been flat. Well, since 2020, that's just taken off with no drop, no abatement to your cost of housing increases.
And if I'm right, that's still got some way to go. And this is actually, I would argue, and again, this is from a finger in the air rather than any number crunching. This is one of the things that's actually eating away at people's true inflation-adjusted net worth faster than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And no one talks about it. No one talks about it. That number there, right, that OOH is the cost of owning a house. The costs of owning a house.
Yep.
Right?
Which, as you can see, have increased by about 6.5%.
Yeah, they're now running at 7.8% and climbing faster. Like, that's not about to sort of crest and then come down again, is it? And this can only do one thing, which is bring people's affordability down, because individual mortgage offers are based on an individual's their income and their expenditure and what's left over, and their expenditures all going up everywhere. And this is going to feed into more house price easing, sliding, whatever you want to call it. But this is something that, again, because if you go back to 2014 on that graph and look, no one's ever really considered it, because the owner-occupier housing inflation, cost inflation, has never gone above 2.5%. And actually, was down near about 1.5% for a long time.
Exactly.
But now, the costs of owning a house are going up at nearly 8% a year. Oh.
Well, we should see them flatten off a bit now. I know you think they've still got a way to run, but given that we may have seen peak mortgage rates, and with all the other associated housing costs, energy, etc., all the utilities,
service charges.
Well, service charges, we're not going to see any slowdown in those in the near future, because people have found what a great wheeze it is to get some money out of these poor bastards with leasehold. Yep. But yeah, it's scary. There's no two ways. And we're getting to the end of the game with mortgages, unless we really are going to trial what Japan trialed and gave up on, the century-long, the intergenerational mortgage. Because at 40 years, we're already putting people past retirement age. Yeah. And with the 6 times salary multiple, the only way you can make that affordable is if you extend the years, but we are already in pension age. So unless we do a Japanese thing, and they abandoned it, even they said, no, this is just ridiculous. There's no more you can't squeeze that stone anymore to get more cash out of it.
There's a silver lining to all of this, which is that affordability is for first-time buyers. Affordability is going to continue to improve.
Yes, it certainly should do. I mean, when the guy I was talking to last night, he's the funniest downsizer in the world, having retired. He just bought a house that was worth twice as much, and is bigger.
Because that was a good story.
And is bigger and has land. But he had a valuation done on his old house by a Rick surveyor back in 2019. And they told him at the time it was worth 750 grand. He found the perfect place that he wants to be in his retirement with his wife, all sorted. And it was on for 1.9. So he's a bloody good negotiator. I've seen him around the negotiating table. And he got them to take a little over 300,000 off that price, which meant, given that he has lots of other assets, he wasn't too bothered about selling his existing house. And so he said, well, they valued it in 2019 at 750, but I just want a quick sale. I just want it gone. I want it out of the way. So he put it on the market at 650 on the understanding that whoever came forwards, he wanted it sold within 3 months, 12 weeks, end to end, just get it done. And this person went, okay, that's brilliant. It's brilliant. And this is great value and all this sort of good stuff. And ever since then has just been coming back with, but the boiler's quite old. I mean, you've got all the warranties and you've got the certificates, but can you just replace the boiler? And can you? And this guy's sitting there going, can you just fuck off? Yeah. I've already given you. I've given you what I believe is a decent deal.
So he's 100 grand less than the 2019 valuation.
Correct.
But Alex, Halifax says that record house prices.
Well, remember, he got 350 grand off the other one, which he bought.
I'm saying it is bonanza time if you're upsizing like that. Anyone upsizing, happy days. He's got 300 grand off what he's upsizing to. That is also whether, if you're fortunate enough to be upsizing, it's a great time. But those people are not in the majority.
No, well, you have to be 61.
And he's he's selling. This is what when house prices really are going through the roof and breaking records, you get the anecdotes. You hear about them. You hear about individual record prices being achieved. There is none of that. No. None of that. Right? This is why I'm so frustrated with this misleading national average thing, because it's so weird. And there are sellers who are just like, I don't understand. Everyone, and the ONS and the Halifax are all saying that record house prices, and they're going up. Why is there tumbleweed blowing past my house instead of buyers queuing up to buy it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet, okay, so yeah, there are winners and losers here, aren't there? In going into 2025, if you're upsizing, everything's good, happy days, that's great. If you're downsizing, do not delay. If you're downsizing, do not delay. And if you're a first-time buyer, it's not too bad. But let's just talk about. So I think the topic we want to go into here is, compared to someone who wants to work hard, have a nice life, save some money, and retire comfortably, your 61-year-old friend from last night, he's done just that, right? He's retiring very comfortably with a 7-figure pension and a nice 7-figure house. He's done all right, thank you very much.
Yes.
What are the prospects for today's 20 and 30-somethings for having a nice job, working hard, getting paid well, and having a nice pension to retire with? What are their prospects?
Well, I mean, we can't use him. I'll explain why. We can't use him because he actually started work for this company at the age of 18, without a degree, obviously, with very few qualifications, started at the bottom, worked his way up, until by the time he was about 45, they offered him the COO position. And he's done that ever since. And so he benefited from, in the first instance, there were unions. And so there was great pay in terms of also your defined benefit pensions. He benefited from all of the house price from the 80s and 90s. And he got to the point where at his level, people literally hand out, £1 million goodbyes, as well as allowing you to convert your DB pension into X, Y, and Z. And you walk away knowing that your income, without a state pension, just your income is going to be at least 100K a year forever. Thank you very much. Without even touching the capital, which he can pass on to his kids. So here's where it becomes interesting. His children are going to do very, very well, thank you very much. Because no matter how much care this person ever needs, there will be plenty of money to pay for it. And he will, sorry?
Because of the income.
No, because of the capital that he's now got. You could live in a care home for 50 years. So, that's unlikely. But more importantly, because he is so proactive, he's handing out large lump sums now at the age of 61, knowing that he's going to make, or at least strongly suspecting he's going to make the 7 years. And so his kids, who are in their 30s, are doing very well. That's fantastic for them. And it's the divide between the haves and have-nots, because if you don't have him as your parent and you are having to do it yourself, then working in office at the moment, what percentage are they putting in to match your pension contribution? And bear in mind, it's defined contribution, not defined benefit. So there's no guarantee as to what you'll get at the end. That will depend on whether you take an annuity and where Rachel Reeves has invested it in the infrastructure in this country and how successful that is. And your salary in comparison is peanuts with the salaries versus cost of living of 20 years ago. Salaries, real wages, have been atrocious. Yes, we've just had this period of growth. Well, we had a period of growth over inflation. So in the 70s, we had a period of very high inflation, over 25%, something like that. And we ended up with a 25% pay rise for the public sector in one go, just bang. Have we seen that? Is that what we've seen across the board? How are the private sector doing outside of financial services, who have done very well? So this is where I go back to the death and poverty piece, is because the cost of housing is so high, you have nowhere else to put your money so that you cannot build up. People are cutting back on pension contributions. They're not putting in the sort of money that you need in a defined contribution scheme to be comfortable in old age. They are depending, or hoping to depend, if their parents have any money, that they will inherit it, which may not be the case. And their jobs are not paying them enough to afford housing and at the same time invest in anything productive, which doesn't just screw them for the future, it screws the country, because as a country, all of our money is tied up in illiquid fucking houses and not in entrepreneurial activities and new technologies and companies. Yeah, there'll be plenty of people watching this channel that go, oh, well, I'm in ETFs and I've got S&P 500, I'm in these companies, I've had Nvidia since the start, I've had Bitcoin, I'm all sorted. You are in the absolute minority. We are still, compared with our American cousins, not a good country where people invest themselves. Oh, it's in the bank. I've got a high rate savings account in the bank. Doesn't even match inflation.
Yeah. So for people not fortunate enough to get into the high paying end of financial services, or not fortunate enough to have parents with 8-figure net worth.
Mm-hmm.
I had someone ask me the question today, what do we do? Like, okay, I own a house. It's no longer going up in value. I accept that. I thought it was going to. So the money I budgeted to be paying off my house was also imagining that the value would be going up, and I'd be accumulating some savings in the value of my house. And this person said, I now accept that's not the case, but I don't have any other money to invest anywhere else.
Yep.
What do I do? How do I break out of the trap? Because it feels like a trap. And this is where I think that's what made me think, yeah, it is a trap if you bought.
Of course it is.
It's a horrible trap. And someone has actually asked the question, which I want to bring up at this point. Jean-Marc says, should we be talking about yield of a property for investment? There isn't any anymore. Basically, there just isn't.
It's pretty low.
If you want to factor inflation, I mean, bringing up that inflation graph again, what you'll see is that CPIH is higher than house price growth, even just using the ONS's own numbers. CPIH is at 3.5%, house price growth is at 3.4%. So even with all the good news, the official numbers there tell you that the value of your home is still declining. So there's no yield on that. And in fact, once you start to factor in your owner operating costs going up at 8%, you've got a depreciating high maintenance liability, not an asset.
Exactly. And Anthony has one of the comments there, if you want to throw that one up. Not buying a house doesn't have a happy ending. Okay, Anthony, and this is where, and this is very simple.
That's not
well. Let's take his premise.
Mm-hmm.
Here is the issue, and the issue is us, and that means everyone watching this and everyone in the UK. The problem that we have is we're so obsessed with housing, and we have the banks like drug dealers who are enablers for us. We are so addicted to housing that the moment anyone gets more pay, it goes into a house. And we used to have mortgages that were only 2.5 times a single salary. Then when women were allowed to get mortgages, it was 2.5 times plus 1 times the other person's salary. And they were over 25 years. Now, as we just discussed earlier, we've extended the time, we've extended it, we've increased the multiples so that people can still afford the monthly payment, but can bid a much higher amount for the house. If we just turned around as a nation and said, I will never spend more than 35% of my after-tax salary on a mortgage, we could stop all of this crap and actually have money left over to invest in other things. But whilst we continue to outbid and claw our way to get the best house in the best place possible, house prices will be enabled by banks. And as long as there's no regulation stopping them, and there's regulation in as much as they have to lend a certain amount of mortgages at lower multiples and the lower years in order to lend at the higher multiples and the higher years. But the FCA, let's face it, is just letting people get away with this stuff. And if they are allowed to continue to do that, there's only 2 ways this gets fixed. Either we have to regulate the banks, or as humans, we have to sit there and go, do you know what? I could, if I stretch myself to the point of breaking, afford to put another 50 grand in for this house with a mortgage, but I'm not gonna. And let's face it, we're not going to do that because we're humans and we'll just fight and scrabble our way to spend as much as we can because we're fucking idiots.
Yeah, I 100% agree with all of that. And I'm beginning to see, the message is beginning to get through. I'm beginning to see more and more like pings on the radar of people going, let's not overstretch ourselves, actually. Let's not buy a place to make money. Let's accept that we're just buying a home to live in.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more people who start to realize that, and that, yeah, even if it is devaluing because of inflation very slightly, and even if it does cost you 1% of its value a year to maintain it, that's an acceptable price to pay for a home you want to live in.
Yeah, I mean, you can't expect housing to be free. I mean, that's also the communist strike that did not work out well. Housing must have a value, and that is important. It's also important because people tend to care more about the things that they have to spend money on rather than somebody else spending money on it. Then they care about it less. But why are we making it? Why are we ourselves making it so hard that housing is impossible now for young people?
Yeah, because it's just not supposed to be this hard. Yeah, and this is, I think, a major problem. The sort of sickness, I'm out of work because I'm signed off sick, or long-term sick numbers out of work. I honestly think, like, and some of it's down to mental health in the numbers. If you can't find a job that pays you enough money to have a basically decent life, what's the fucking point of working? Literally. And so there is an argument. I don't think, we may not be able to prove it, but there's an argument that says housing becoming so expensive is what's killed off whatever work ethic we used to have.
It's certainly a contributing factor. I look at all of the people that I grew up with, and I look at their parents, who are now in their late 70s, early 80s. And many of them started out because of, the people of the schools I went to and where I grew up. They're all from roughly the same area of southwest London. And there were people that came from up north, came from Scotland, and they bought a flat when they were in their 20s in places like Putney or Twickenham or St Margaret's, all in that area. And then they had a kid in that flat. They got married, had a kid in that flat. And then, as soon as the second child was born, or sometimes even before, they moved to their second home, which tended to be a terraced 3-bed or one of the new build estates. There were lots in Teddington, was a really popular place for those to happen. And then very shortly after that, so about 6 or 7 years after that, they only stayed in that middle home for 6 or 7 years. And by the time they were 36 to 40, it was somewhere in there, they bought their final house. So around about the same time that many people are buying their first bloody house, they were buying their third final home. And all of them, because they were doctors and lawyers and professional managers in large organizations, they were doing pretty well. They all ended up in 6-bedroom properties that they bought for around £80,000 in 1980 and would now be valued, I'm not saying you'd get it, but be valued at a couple of million. And that just, if you start out now, even as a doctor, let's say you want to be a GP, one of these guys was GP. First of all, are you even going to become a partner in a GP's practice, or are they going to try and keep you as a locum so that you can't make the big bucks because they want to keep the money for themselves in an existing partnership? So yeah, you'll have done all of your study and all of your training, you'll have done your hospital work, you'll have then gone on to do your GP qualifications, and yet you're earning 100k, and you go, well, that puts me in the top 1% of earners in this country. 100k, it's very good. 100k does not buy you, by the time you are 36, a £2 million fucking house.
No. So do you reckon that today's inflation information rules out the chance of a Bank of England rate cut tomorrow?
It shouldn't do, in as much as, the Bank of England knew that everyone knew this was coming, that there would be a slight increase. This is not unexpected in any way, whereas the jobs data and the concerns and the rumblings in the press about the impact of the budget, which at this point is minimal, and this is what's so funny, it is relatively small now. In April it will be different, but people ascribing lots of terrible things to the current budget. Yes, people are preempting it in terms of laying off staff or not employing new staff, but anyway, it's a coin toss at the moment as to whether they go ahead. I think they still might. 50-50.
I think if they do, I mean, I'd be surprised if they do, but I also accept that they might do. But if they do decide to lower the rate tomorrow, to me, that's an early warning sign of, like, they know that things are getting really nasty.
Yes, well, correct. If it goes down tomorrow, that means that they are actually giving credence to the whole idea that we're about to see much larger numbers of unemployment, and therefore they're trying to head that off. If they hold it, then obviously they're not too worried.
The Powers is asking on YouTube, if buying a house is now a bad idea, I haven't said it's a bad idea, I said it's a bad investment. Are you saying renting is the best solution? So there have been two reasons for buying a home. One, a place to live, and another one, to make money. right? Those have been the two popularly accepted reasons for the last 30, 40 years. And generally speaking, that's how it's worked out. As Alex and I have both been saying for a couple of years now, the second reason, buying them to make money, that's now over. That ship has sailed, that party is ended, and we've been given the bill. And so buying a house, if you want to make money from it, is now a bad idea. Yes, as that poor fellow on that video I put on X, he couldn't sell his...
He can't understand it. The government set the prices.
Oh, that was such a funny video. You know, that's had almost 1 million views on my X account.
But
that guy, it was just brilliant. Yeah. So yeah, and this is someone who wasn't listening 2 years ago, wasn't listening to us saying you can't make money anymore. So buying a house is a bad idea if you still think that it's because it's going to be a pension, it's going to make you money, it's going to be a form of savings. It's a bad idea for those reasons, but there are still plenty of good reasons to buy and own a home, to live in it and not be moved on by a landlord, let down by a bad landlord. But from a financial point of view, renting, you're not going to get any sudden shocks with renting like you do if you own a house. You know, yes, you might be asked to move on by your landlord at some point, and that's obviously, that could be very, very disruptive for some people. But right now, if you were to rent as economically as you can and then save and invest as aggressively as you can, you're not going to be subject to the risks of owning a crumbling, weather-prone, vandalizable asset as people who own property are. Because it's just, you know, in the last 3 or 4 years, the financial proposition of owning a house has completely changed. Never mind house prices, the actual financials of ownership of a house have completely changed.
Yep.
And basically, it used to be that the house price growth was big enough to offset your maintenance costs, and it made sense to spend a bit of money doing the house up, and it made sense to maintain it properly because you were maintaining your asset that was growing in value, and the asset that people were remortgaging to release equity to spend on their house.
You must remember from 95 until about 2003, not only people were taking money to build conservatories and do loft conversions and all these wonderful things, but they were also moving house.
Yes.
And then when the prices really started to ramp up, people said, well, do you know what? We can actually bastardize our existing house to get the additional space so we don't have to move. So as I said about my parents' friends, where they went through 3 properties, their starter flat, the terraced sort of new build, and then their final house. What's happened is that people have been stuck in that terraced new build for a couple of decades now, but it now has an additional 50 square meters of space that they've managed to build up. And what's funny is that people have put a floor onto bungalows. So actually for a little less wealthy, there's nowhere to downsize to anymore. If you are a downsizer, there are very few places that actually suit you because so many of them have had conversions done to them. They don't look like the building they were originally.
Yeah. As per that chap on that video, who'd taken a period terraced property and turned it into something.
Well, 2 flats, but just, I mean, madness.
It wasn't done nicely.
No.
So, okay, how fucked is the economy in 2025?
Oh yeah, proper fucked. I mean, all this started for me looking at debt, looking at interest rates, inflation, and debt. I mean, I knew that interest rates were going to go up in 21 when I wrote that. I expected them to go up to somewhere between 5 and 6%, which is, they did. And the debt, looking at the servicing of what we had outstanding, it just became insurmountable, which is why I started talking about debt jubilees as the only way forwards. And the only way we do that is if we remove cash and we go to CBDC and yada, yada, yada. So, it's a whole bunch of steps. And during those steps occurring, bad things happen for a lot of people. And again, I go back to, there will always be people who prosper and do well. But as a generational piece, Most of the people who prosper and do well will be the retired or the about to retire, who have the last of the defined benefit pensions, who have quite a lot of money tied up in houses that have appreciated massively in value over the last 20 years. Whereas those in their 20s and 30s, although they are unlikely to be dying anytime soon because they are young, which is a great bonus, are not going to have a fun fucking life. I mean, you and I in our 20s and 30s, how much fun was that? I mean, Jesus. And these poor bastards are just going to get through life. And they're not even going to get through it in their own home because they aren't buying until they're 34, 35, certainly in London. And they're unlikely to get through it with their own kids at this rate. And so if you're not in a home that you enjoy and you don't have a family and children, what the fuck is the point? You want to talk about a workforce that aren't motivated to work? Well, I would say those two things might play a part.
And what would you say to people who think, oh, the economy's not fucked because they're going to start quantitative easing again?
Oh dear God. Yeah. Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Quantitative easing, as we knew it from 2009, helped no one. That's what's so funny. That was wages fell for 3 years. House prices fell in real terms until 2013. Quantitative easing, when people just go, money printer goes brr, yet wank. That money ended up with the banks, and the banks didn't fucking lend it. And so it benefited almost no one except large corporations, bankers, and so on and so forth. If you mean quantitative easing in the same way that we just gave people lots of money over COVID, yeah, they can do that. But guess what? That directly caused the fucking inflation that we experienced. And did everyone enjoy that when the cost of everything went through the roof? Was that fun for you? You know, your shopping bag that is now half the weight that it was 4 years ago and doesn't contain the rib of beef anymore, or the decent red wine, but it has the special offer £6 bottle. You know that? How about we shrink it again by half? Would you like that? Because that's what will happen if they give more money to people just by printing it centrally.
What I like to hear is, I every now and then I see people who I don't know saying, oh, but they're just going to start printing money again. I've never heard anyone explain the rational argument as to why. They go, oh, I just think they will. I just think they will. I just think they will. And I think that mistaken belief, and I call it mistaken because there's no argument for it. Like, there's literally no argument for it. It isn't, they can't, I think, I sometimes wonder whether people who say this think they can literally just create some money and then we're okay. It's just, they just make some money and then we're okay.
Yeah, and that does work because
demand. It just works. You make money and we're okay. And I think that there are a lot of people who misunderstand the complexity of the system and the consequences of doing these things and think it's easy. You just print money. What I genuinely want to know. What I genuinely want to know is, why do people like Barry Brown, who says it's going to be fine, I bet you they're going to print money. What makes you say that? Do you actually have a sort of reasoned argument as to why and what problems it solves for the government? Because at the moment, they are still doing the opposite. At the moment, we are still going through a gradual process of quantitative tightening. They are unprinting some of the money that they printed in the last 15 years. And that's their stated policy for the foreseeable future.
Yep.
And we, the taxpayer, are picking up the bill for the loss that made. So,
which is an utter joke, because they really could fucking write that off without devaluing the pound. But that is their big concern, is that whatever they do, and we bear in mind that we devalued the pound against the dollar twice last century. It was at $4 to the pound back in the first 20 years of the 1900s, and then we devalued it to something like 2.5 or whatever it is. Now, without an official devaluation, we're at 1.2 or wherever we are at the moment. But the idea is that if we default, even internally, even by paying back the Bank of England, from the Treasury for imaginary money that was fucking printed or the losses on it, the pound will collapse. And if the pound collapses, given that we import a lot of stuff, we're going to be in trouble. So, that's where I go back to debt jubilees, because it's the only way we can get away with it.
But the earliest you expect that is not for like another 5-6 years, is
longer than that. Yeah, I mean that would be the absolute quickest. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as 2025 is concerned, we are. We haven't discussed this off camera, so I don't know what you're going to say. But are we or are we not in agreement that we're going to be seeing rising unemployment,
Yeah.
flatlining wage growth,
Yeah.
increased number of corporate insolvencies as zombies start to turn toes up? So yeah, you agree more zombie companies going bust?
Well, although how those fuckers have managed to survive this long, I have no idea. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, you make a very good point. And you know, you do get these conversations that happen behind closed doors where people at the government talk to people at Kroll, for example, and Begbie's trainer and the actual administrators of all these zombie companies, and go, just buy some time. Don't let them all go pop yet.
Extend and pretend. We love it. Sorry, Patricia. You're probably right. I mean, I believe that debt jubilees are the best way out of this.
Sorry, Patricia said no debt jubilees, too much self-interest, instead financial repression.
Yeah. Well, let me put it this way. If you'd asked me 4 years ago whether we would be celebrating, not just allowing, but celebrating ×6 multiple salaries for mortgages and extending the term to 40 years, I would have said any government that allows that would be fucking idiotic. I mean, that's just going to pump prices and make it even more unaffordable. You'd have to be totally stupid to do that. And yet, that's exactly what they've allowed. So, will we have debt jubilees? Maybe not. In fact, probably not. Let's face it. It's a wacky concept that all these countries would get together and write off debt without actually devaluing their currencies. But with Trump now trying to protect the dollar, which is why he's so anti-CBDC. And again, I don't blame him for that because CBDCs are frightening as fuck. But with Trump, you're never quite sure which way he's going to jump. So we could be in for a really interesting time because he could make the whole of Europe suffer massively if he wants to, and especially if he's trying to protect the dollar.
Well, Patricia thinks QE is going to come back.
Yep.
So, Patricia, what do you think is going to trigger that? Is there going to need to be some kind of event for that to happen, or? And why? So did you see the 10-year gilt yield has gone up to 26-year high today? So it's dwarfing the. Someone said we need to get a lettuce out to see if it outlasts Rachel Reeves. I saw that today somewhere. But I just want to run through. We've had some interesting comments. Just a quick whiz through these. Earlier on, Barry Brown said, land registry data for Kensington and Chelsea, it's on down 27% in 2 years on all property types. Okay. So thank you. Some vindication there. I said prices will be coming down, and that's land registry data. I haven't checked it myself, but thank you for that. Perry James, CPIH figures today, it's running up and away. Changes coming says, according to BBC, class calculator, I'm technical middle class. All that means is I'm instead of living off Tesco Valley baked beans, I can afford M&S baked beans. Yippee! Yippee! Angie R says, Charlie, do you worry for your children's futures? Yes, for a long list of reasons, but that's not for this video. But yes, I do. Yeah, definitely. Probably uncertainty being the biggest one of them as well. Yeah. Changes coming says, I'm getting a 150-year mortgage and putting my future great-great-great-grandson on the application.
Sounds a fine idea.
Barry Brown again saying, housing being expensive has radicalized my entire generation. What generation is that, Barry? Parliament in 10 years' time will be unrecognizable. That could be interesting as well. Davey Dave says, fix housing, fix everything. Truest thing I've heard in years. I like that. I'm going to be continuing to get this message out there. Thomas Moran says, at what point do you think people will realize that we are fucked? That reminds me. Have you been watching Black Doves on Netflix?
Yes.
Did you like that line when the actor Ben Whishaw, he's walking in, they're going in to kill that guy, or trying to kill that guy, and he turns around and goes, we're all fucked, darling.
Yes.
There's some really, really good lines in that
It was
show.
well delivered, but I still find it difficult that an 8-stone, balletically thin Keira Knightley is throwing 16-stone men around. That
Well, I
doesn't.
also love the diminutive Greek Cockney woman
Yeah.
gangster with one of my favourite lines yet. Is, I'm the prick who sent the prick to kill the prick, and you didn't. By the way, if you haven't watched it, by the way, Black Doves, I'll give it.
It is worth watching. Good fun.
It is good fun. But I mean, yeah, highly unlikely. But how boring would it be if it wasn't? Most people I speak to think that things will recover, but I have no idea why, and neither do they. It's just hope. Yes, Thomas.
Yes.
And this is that is a concept I would actually love to explore in more detail on another video, which is where does that phenomenon arise from? Where people don't really know why it's going to be okay; they just think it is, because that is what I think underperforming governments rely upon.
Yes.
Everyone thinking, "Oh, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right."
Well, but the reason we're in this situation, and I mean, you remember, so, oh God, our economy, and in fact, all economies globally, you can look this up, have a look on Google, you will discover that the cost and availability of energy predicates whether your economy is rich or not. There is no such thing as a low energy, high value economy anywhere in the world. And we, as a nation, and Europe, and in Germany in particular recently, have literally been killing ourselves. I mean, this is ultimate masochism. We are destroying our own wealth because we have insisted on not investing in things like nuclear, and rather investing in intermittent renewables, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I'm not suggesting we should go back to coal. What I'm saying is the transition between the two has not been managed well because it's been short term. Everything has been about the government's length of time in power. And when you have an economy which depends, and people will say, but we're a service industry now, there's no manufacturing, therefore power is less important. Sort of. We are becoming a science and AI country, or machine learning country. And that requires vast amounts of power for the data centers and also in the science buildings and equipment. And I've got 2 developments at the moment where power, we just don't have enough. And to upgrade the grid in order to get those interconnects is going to cost millions on top of the development. And more importantly, isn't going to be available potentially for 3 to 5 years. So there are so many things we've got wrong. And when Thomas says, you know, it's all hope that it'll get fixed. Yeah, it is, because we're not doing the fundamental things that we need to do, like grow our economy, which doesn't require more taxation, but requires investment in something, whether it's machine learning, whether it is science, whatever it may be. We need to really back something and get in there and do it, not talk about it. They've been talking about small modular reactors now for well over a decade at the government level. And the Hinkley Point C, which still isn't online, is massively over budget. And when it comes online, we'll only have 1 reactor before, I mean, the second reactor won't be until 2030, I think. But that's 1 dinosaur station. We should have been out there innovating, and nobody has the balls to fucking do it. Sorry,
I don't think Britain has been a really competitive country for a very long time, except in particular niches where it has done well, like financial services. But I mean, even that, the London Stock Exchange is just kind of fading away now.
Yeah. Well, nobody lists here from the science companies. I mean, how many ministers have stood there and said, well, the UK is going to become the science hub of the world. You know, we're going to innovate. We're going to build a new Silicon Valley, and it's going to be science. They've been saying this for ages. And don't get me wrong, there is investment, but there's investment in basic CL2 labs and not in companies. And so every time a startup, whether it's T cells for cancer therapies, whether it's clean tech to work on the windmills, whatever it may be, whenever these companies list, whenever they IPO to get that money in to continue their research, they list in America. They go on the NASDAQ because they get more money. Although even there, they're now not getting enough. So what then happens is they have to use American governance. They have to open an American office in order to comply with the rules of the NASDAQ, which takes all the money away from their research, which is why so many of them go bust about 3 to 4 years after they IPO. What a fucking waste.
I mean, as someone who has started up multiple businesses, got investment from venture capitalists, that kind of stuff, I remember quite quickly coming to the conclusion that the investor landscape in the UK still thinks it's the 1970s mainly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very traditional. I mean, some of the questions they ask, and when you realise that the investors who you're talking to about investing in your tech, cloud-based business don't understand what any of those things mean, you realise you're not going to have any way of persuading them what the value in your proposition is, because they don't even understand the concept. You know, we have been we are a technically suspicious. Businesses in this country don't like technology, generally speaking. I'm not talking about the tech startups themselves. I'm talking about everyday, all other businesses. We are hopelessly slow to adopt technology in this country.
Yeah.
Really,
even though we traditionally or historically have been right at the forefront of working on and inventing this, from nuclear through to semiconductors, and yet
it's so sad that, because we literally led the jet age, but we had to give it all to America to repay our debt to them for helping us out during the war.
Yep.
That's how we repaid. There you are. And that was it. That was our real ace up our sleeve gone. So right, we've got record homelessness. We've got record numbers of families in temporary accommodation, so their lives are on hold. You can't do anything from there. Both of those numbers are rising at the expense of the taxpayer who's going to pick up the bill.
Yeah.
We have a government who just doesn't understand the housing market, and by the housing market I don't mean people moving house. I mean the housing market, the actual stock, the housing stock, and people, and how it works, how it functions. And every idea they come out with, almost every idea, is a bad idea. Except, did you see that the MOD bought back a whole bunch of houses, 6 billion quid worth of houses?
Oh, did they? Oh, okay. Where was this?
Today, it was
whereabouts? Do you know?
Okay. All over the place. 6 billion quid worth of MOD residential property that they did a sale and leaseback on before, and there's a 3.8% return on that in money saved on rent. So I have my suspicions as to what their motives are, because it's an unusually shrewd move for this government.
Yeah. Yes. Well, was it the government, or was it someone in the civil service or the MOD went, hang on, guys?
Yeah. So that was one thing I thought, that's good. That's as long as that's for the right reasons, that's good and clever, and yes, it's going to save the taxpayer money. But all of this talk about we've got to build £1.5 million homes is such a massive red herring and distraction. It isn't going to solve the problem. There are other ways you can solve the problem more quickly. But until people in their late teens, 20s, and 30s of any education level feel like it is worthwhile going to work, so that they can have a life in return, I don't see any hope for growth. I don't see any prospects.
I agree.
For the country or for those generations. And
when you tax people through the nose, even if they've got a reasonable salary.
Yeah, exactly. So even people, this is why at any education level, and any salary level, there's really just because if you're okay, great, you're a minimum wage, your tax is quite low, you can't afford a decent life on minimum wage. Like, if you live in the parts of the country where house prices are at their very, very lowest, perhaps, I think you're doing a 40-hour week of minimum wage now, you're on 26 grand a year. And I think, 4.5 times that might get you a home in certain parts of the country. If you've got a good
and you must remember that we are terribly biased in a lot of the things. When we just make blanket statements, we are very biased about the Southeast. And there are certainly places around the country where these things do not cost the sort of numbers that we spit out, because we're so used to seeing them in the areas where we're living.
Oh, that's a question I wanted to ask you. Why does Google want to crack Bitcoin with its supercomputer? Why would it? Anyway, that's not for now. That's maybe later on. But so 2025, we're expecting unemployment to get worse. We're expecting wage growth to flatline. We're expecting company phase. So there's the. I mean, I'm much more cautious now about expecting the worst. After the last 2 years, both of us have had our expectations slightly dashed with how companies have clung on with their fingernails, not gone under.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow the government gaslighting of the figures has made it like we're not in recession when we truly fucking are. You know, as individuals, we've been in recession with our GDP per head for a while.
Well, but hang on. People are going to go, no, but we're not in recession because, you know, you have to have this. Yeah, okay. Technically.
Oh, Alex, lost you. Hello? Come in, Alex. Don't leave me. I think Alex's internet's just gone. Can't hear you. Got nothing if you can hear me. Oh, he's coming back. Hang on.
Charlie, sorry,
Right.
I don't know what happened there.
Sorry, we lost you for a sec. You're back now.
Okay, I just wanted to say, when I'm using the word recession, I'm not doing the technical definition, even though there are a number of different definitions. What I'm saying is that our economy is contracting on a personal per head level, and that we are individually, with some rare exceptions, worse off than we were previously.
Yeah. This is my point. No one's better off. Everyone's worse off.
Well, let me put it this way. I did the maths recently because somebody was telling me, as a contractor, they go, well, I mean, you know, Jesus, your day rate, whoa, whoa. And I worked it out. So I started contracting in 1998. And in 1998, I was able to keep roughly 65% of my day rate. So between my corporation tax, my employees' national insurance, my income tax, if you got a day rate, I was keeping about 65%. That has now changed so that although my day rate is slightly more than double what it was in 1998, slightly more than double what it was, nominally, what I'm taking home. So in terms of if you were to compare the two, you know, I've beaten inflation by about 10% in terms of my day rate. So much as my experience has increased massively over 25 years, there really has been no real increase, about 10% increase. But when you work out the taxes now with the new freezes, I am actually 20% on an annual basis worse off than I was as a 26-year-old with one project under my belt.
Yeah, that's not working, is it?
No. It's which is why people say to me, "Oh, we've seen your day rate. We want to become contractors." I'm like, do not be so fucking stupid. You've got a permanent job where you've got sick leave, you've got stock options, you've got health insurance, you've got death in service, you've got everything. Just stay there and do well. Contracting became a mug's game ever since 2007.
Billy Big called makes a good interesting point. What will happen when people realize there's not enough money to pay the state pension and civil service pensions, etc.? The liabilities are huge.
Well, that's why we talked about, I think, in our first Death in Poverty video, I said we were lucky we didn't have guns like America and that people would need to live in gated communities.
I know we're through some more comments I've pinned. Alexandra Sewell says, where do we invest to actually make money? I would suggest you head over to Sasha Yanshin's channel or another one like it, because there are a million different answers to that question. It depends on your personal risk preference. But it can be done, and it can be done safely. I would just avoid intermediary fees. That's what I say to anyone.
Yeah.
Don't pay someone else to invest your money for you. Figure out what you want to do with it yourself, and don't do any stupid high-risk stuff. Popolop says, is there any hope for 2026? I don't think so. I don't think we're going to see. I don't think we're going to see any improvement in our prospects as a country until the government changes. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what this means. Is the fire dream dead for those starting with nothing? What's the fire dream?
That's so you retire early. It's you live like a church mouse on almost nothing, but you then retire at 40. It's an admirable way to do it. People who are disciplined enough to live like that, I've watched a few of them, and it's like, wow, you are literally putting your life on hold for 15, 20 years. But then when you're still young enough at 40, you can go off and do the things you want to do, depending on how much you saved. It will never be dead for people who are willing to sacrifice as much as these guys do. You know, okay, so you may not be in a shared house. Perhaps you're now living in a tent and using the local swimming pool for a shower. But
so there's definitely no Netflix and avocado toast.
No, there's no avocado toast if you're a fire person.
Rick Scohill asks, why are we not seeing the repossessions picking up? How are people managing to survive with so many redundancies? So repossessions are picking up, but they're still at a very low level. Relatively, they're low. They are starting to grow, and in my opinion, they will continue to grow steadily for some time. And the reason we're not seeing them picking up yet is because of the forbearance that the government asked the banks for.
Yeah.
But listen, anyone who watches this or knows someone who's had their home repossessed by their mortgage lender, tell that person who's lost their home to watch the sale of that property like a hawk, because the bank and the agent are legally obliged to make sure they get fair market value for it. And if they don't, they come after you for the difference, for the shortfall.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the law is very, very clear. And and what I know happens with dodgy agents is that, oh, well, it's a repossession, it's a bit shabby, and we'll put a couple of adverts up, but the photos won't be that great, and actually we'll quietly put it out the back door to our mates. That does happen, and it happens more with repossessions than other properties. So where there are repossessions, and you've got a friend who's had their house repossessed being sold, the worst is not over at that point. This is the point people need to understand. You've had your house repossessed by your lender. You're probably in negative equity, right? The worst is not yet over, because if they then sell it at an undervalue, the bank doesn't care because it comes after you for the difference.
Yep.
Piers Wilmot says, no idea how people are funding their lives right now.
No, and yet I was out in Richmond. I mean, I've been, as you know, I've been to a few Christmas parties recently. But I was out in Richmond a couple of days ago, absolutely packed, every restaurant packed, couldn't get a table. Yesterday, out in Borough Market in the evening, still busy. You know, there were a lot of people out and about. I don't know where the money's coming from. I have no idea.
Luke and Stan Explore asks, middle class impoverished? What about working class? Stop this version of class war. I think you misunderstood something. We're not saying the middle class are worse off than the working class at all. I think Alex's point with the whole middle class impoverishment thing is about how people didn't see that coming.
No, exactly. I mean, it's accepted that people in the working class now are pretty much fucked. But the middle class, that couple from the story, they think they're doing really well. They think life's going to be wonderful for them. They're aspirational to have their kid and drive a nice shiny German car, and they got their flat in London, and yet they end up fucked. Which is why we will just end up with, it's not about a class war. We will end up with two groups of people, those who have and those who have not. And the group in the haves will no longer include the traditional middle class. It will be a very small group of people. Whether they have been very lucky with Bitcoin investment, or whether they have inherited a lot of money from parents, or whether they have actually started a tech business themselves and made, millions or billions. But they will be a tiny percentage of the population.
So we have a challenger. David Littlewood says, what happened to 25% price drops then? They've already happened in some places for some markets. As I think was it someone mentioned earlier on the land registry, 27% in Kensington and Chelsea in the last 2 years. We still haven't got to 2025. There's a lot more to come. The prices have been sliding. That's what's happening. they are happening in some areas, not in others, different rates. So repos carefully controlled and marketed up to exchange. You are spreading myth truths. David, I'm assuming you're an agent. And I know that reputable agents will market their repossessions carefully and market it up to exchange. And that's good, but please don't pretend that there aren't also some very dodgy agents that do the dodgy on those repos, because there are, right? I'm not saying all agents do that, and I hope I didn't imply that. I'm just talking about the dodgy ones, right? I'm just talking about
all you said was that people should watch like a hawk if their house has been repossessed to ensure that it's put up for fair value. That's...
ED11 says, a lot of properties I viewed this month, the estate agent told me they were from repossessions from the bank. Yeah, and there was one, I had someone who told me that they went to see what they thought was a 4-bedroom house repossession, and it turned out to be a 7-bedroom house and a repossession. It was being mismarketed.
Oh, Jesus. Anders is back.
Oh, hello, Anders.
Have you seen that?
Yes, I think we should probably answer this question.
Yeah. And Anders, I hope everything is wonderful for you and your house is working out brilliantly.
Yes, thank you. I hope so too. Hi, everyone. I have come to the conclusion that capitalism is the problem. We are so desperate trying to make a living, resulting in having completely unbalanced lives, consequently affecting our younger generations, disregarding quality family times. We're losing common sense and family values. I don't disagree with that. I would suggest, I would offer or add a slight adjustment to it. Capitalism isn't the problem in itself. Capitalism, in my view, is the least bad of the ideologies on offer.
You mean just like democracy?
It's unchecked capitalism that's the problem.
Yeah.
Capitalism works really, really well when huge wealth is deployed to spread prosperity. And whenever the super wealthy deploy their wealth in such a way that it spreads prosperity without diminishing their wealth, nobody resents them for their wealth. In fact, they are, in those scenarios, generally applauded and thanked. But the problem is that too many people just hoard their wealth, like manically hoard it. I agree with you totally on family values, by the way. But I mean, look what's happening in Argentina at the moment, right? He's ended the deficit, he's ended the recession, he's pretty much got inflation under control, with a lot of pain.
Yes, I mean, he's caused an enormous amount of poverty, but as we've discussed, the only way through this is going to cause a large amount of pain to a large number of people. But that's because we haven't accepted the pain for the last 25 years. You know, ever since the dot-com crash, we've done everything we can to avoid any pain. And that included QE, it included stupidly low interest rates that then impacted everything from wages to our productivity in terms of new businesses because of investment opportunities that were lost. And then over COVID, you go, well, there had to be a response. No, anyway, you know, there have been so many things, and there is no way through this without pain.
That's the point.
It could have been a lot less painful if we just got it fucking sorted 20 years ago, but we didn't, and we just increased the debt, and away we go. We're at the end of it. I can't see, and again, I couldn't see how they could make mortgages more palatable. But they did. They extended to 40 years and they increased the multiple of salaries. So, yeah, we can keep doing that, but we do get to a hard stop because there comes a point where it's still not feasible. And we're at that point now with mortgages. I think we're at that point with debt and debt servicing. So we're going to take the pain. And part of that pain is all of our infrastructure and services like the NHS, like the national grid, like our train system and our motorways. They're shit. And they're going to be shit. And we're going to get used to stories, headlines over winter of, well, the NHS is so rammed that people are dying unnecessarily in corridors. Yeah, they are. That's such is life.
By the way, for those of you wondering about Andis's generosity, He's someone who previously has thanked Alex and I for helping him save tens of thousands of pounds on property purchase. So he's doing what I'm pointing out, right? He's a capitalist spreading the prosperity.
And also a top bloke. Thank you, Anders.
Good capitalist and absolutely a top bloke. Yeah, very much so. This is a good question. XL2828 says, so how do you know if you are in a position to get through the storm? Or are you fucked anyway? How do you know if you've overpaid or got a good deal on your place to live? So first of all, typically, if you have to even ask the question, you're probably already fucked. Yeah. That's my quite harsh initial reaction to that question. How do you know? Because if you don't know that you're not fucked, you probably are fucked. That's my point. So
yes.
In order to understand the long-term ramifications of the changes to tax, inflation, property prices, wages, it's actually quite complicated maths to do it long-term and to do the compounding effect of all these different things. And most people don't do that. Yeah, they just don't. I get that. It's not fun, unless you're Alex. It's not fun doing stuff like that, right? I mean, I can do it too, and I don't enjoy it as much as you do, but I do enjoy it. I tend to sort of do rough mental arithmetic on this stuff and just go, and do a very quick and dirty rough cut, fag packet stuff, and it tends to work. But you basically, in a nutshell, you've got to be accumulating savings at a faster rate than inflation is decumulating them. I know that's not a word.
Yes, but regardless of a job that you are dependent on, and that's the bit that, if things get as bad as I think they may, I think you think they may, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, because there's going to be, as we said 2 years ago, and they finally made some announcements about 10,000 people being cut from the civil service. As somebody said, yeah, get back to me when it's 100,000. But yes, whatever it is, job security, which, let's face it, has fallen dramatically over the last 60 years. If you were good 60 years ago in a job for a company, there was every chance that they would not only keep you, but that they would promote you to different roles in that organization. How my friend who I was speaking to last night ended up as COO for the last 10 to 15 years of his working career, because he got promoted through the company. And now that's just not the way it's worked for 20, 25 years in many industries. You have to change company, which gives you no consistency, and also means that people become more cutthroat because there is no loyalty from either employer or employee. And which one came first? I'm going to guess it was the employers who adopted the American model, who shafted their employees.
No, I know the answer to this.
Go on.
It's in the book Sapiens. It was the first humans who worked out how to plant crops and realized that they needed people to work on those crops. And they basically enslaved them, but said that they got food. And that was the beginning of the exploitation of the worker 10,000 years ago.
But however, that doesn't explain why there was much more company loyalty in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and many people I know worked for one firm their entire careers and got promoted all the way through that firm until they ended up running it. And today, you very rarely see that happen, and people change jobs every couple of years.
Well, but I think back then it made more sense. People didn't like people who flitted about, lived and changed companies. You were considered a bed hopper of sorts if you did that as an employee. It was genuinely frowned upon, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You made one or two very, very carefully considered moves that made sense, but that was it. We're getting into other questions here, but so how do you want to wrap up? So do you have anything to add to your expectations for 2025 that are different now compared to a few years ago?
No, I mean, well,
for your middle class couple who overpaid for their flat a few years ago.
It does depend on whether they continue with this whole bank forbearance piece. I mean, you remember that we had people telling us that interest rates were not going to go above 3%.
I do remember that.
Yeah,
I do.
you remember. And then
only a year ago said that interest rates would be 2% by now.
Correct. And so you remember that. And then you remember that when they got to 5%, there were people going, they're going to go to 9%. It's like, no, Jesus, fuck me, no. What's wrong with you people? It's either it's not going to go anywhere or it's going to go through the roof. The maximum that we could get to on interest rates without crashing the country instantly was about 6%, which is why I didn't even bother calculating the impact above 6.5%. However, we both agreed that they were going to stay much higher, because the people then said, oh, well, they'll come back down. As you just said, they'll be down at 2 or 3% by the end of the year, and no issues at all. Well, they're currently 5%. They may come down to 4.75 tomorrow, or they may stay at 5.
They are 4.75.
Are they? No, they're not. Oh, have they had 2 cuts?
Yeah, there've been 2 cuts this year. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So, they may come down, they may not. We'll see. But aside from that, there's nothing really that's changed in our situation. We still owe vast amounts in debt. We're not producing as an economy. Our GDP per capita is still lower than it was in 2019. We've got an NHS waiting list that's still over 7 million people, despite everything heading forward, supposedly. No, it's still fucked. It's just taken a bit longer.
Yes. I find myself more concerned about 2025 than I did about 2023. And I think because I was expecting a sharper downturn in 2023 that then did happen. and the sharper downturn I was expecting in 2023 in the economy as a whole didn't happen as sharp as I was expecting it to.
Yep.
I think it's been instead death by 1,000 cuts over the last 2 years. It's been a slow, frog boiling, small cuts, people bleeding out slowly. So I think we are actually, as a result of that 2-year deterioration of people's finances and prospects, I think we're less well prepared for what's coming in 2025. And I think it's going to make it feel more hurty.
Yeah. I'm on that happy note.
Yeah. Go and watch Death in Poverty.
I've got lamb shanks about to come out the oven, mate.
Patricia says that she was one of the people who thought differently from us, as the economy would not recover from COVID. Well, Patricia, do you expect the rates to come right down? You didn't factor the impact of huge government spending.
Government spending, yeah.
Wow, lots of great questions we didn't get a chance to answer. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I'm not sure whether we've helped anybody or not. I mean, if we just...
It's helped me. I've had a good rant. That's built up an appetite.
So Davey Dave says, Charlie and Stig, have a great break over Christmas. We need both of you to be on your top game in 2025. Your country needs you. Seriously. Well, that's very, very kind to hear.
Thank you, Davey.
That's great to hear. And we'll continue to do our best, because genuinely, there are very few other people trying to just find the truth amongst all of the vested interest shit that's out there. And Alex, thank you very much as well.
Pleasure, mate.
Everyone else?
Just one.
Yeah,
check. I don't read economics books, so I don't have any recommendation for you. But if you have a look on X, there is a guy, Trev Goes Forth, who Charlie and I have had some fights with and then some friendships with. He keeps putting up some really good book, or a lot of people say that they are very good economics books. So I'd have a look at that if I were you.
Carlos says, just been out for a night walk in the pouring rain while listening to this, and wow, what a mood booster.
Sorry, Carlos.
Still want to buy a home next year, though. Oh, God, it hasn't worked, Alex. It hasn't worked.
Yeah.
He's still drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean, hopefully, yeah, he's joking. Yeah.
Right, I'm running away.
Thank you, mates. Thanks. Have a great one. And everyone else.
Have a fantastic time. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Happy Christmas, everyone.